Now, this is where the events of the movie and the book really start to diverge. In the movie, the next scene we see is Hagrid informing the trio that Buckbeak's been sentenced to death, but in the book that happens later. It's actually the event that reconciles Ron and Hermione. In the book, the next big thing that happens is Gryffindor's Quidditch match against Ravenclaw, and the Ravenclaw seeker is actually Cho Chang, another character who will have a bigger role in future books and movies. During the match, Lee Jordan spends a good amount of his commentary gushing over Harry's new firebolt. What appear to be 3 Dementors also show up during the match, and Harry conjures a fully formed Patronus to drive them off. He doesn't see what form it takes, though. After catching the snitch and winning the match, Harry finds out that they weren't actually Dementors, but Malfoy, Crabbe, Goyle, and Marcus Flint dressed up as them in an attempt to sabotage him. All 4 of them get detention, of course. While I'm fine with them cutting the Quidditch match, there is something that happens that night which I think should have been kept in, and in fact is partially shown in a deleted scene. Harry is woken up in the night by Ron screaming in terror. Apparently he had woken up to see Sirius Black standing over him holding a knife. Black had fled before Harry could get the curtains on his bed open. When McGonagall arrives to restore order, both she and Percy are skeptical of Ron's claim, but when she asks Sir Cadogan if he let a man into Gryffindor Tower, he confirms it, claiming he had the password, which he read off a piece of paper. The page of passwords Neville had dropped. Neville gets in serious trouble for this, as McGonagall bans him from Hogsmeade, gives him detention, and forbids anyone to give him the passwords to Gryffindor Tower. And the worst part is, it wasn't even Neville's fault. As we learn at the end, Neville didn't lose the page at all. Crookshanks stole it and brought it to Sirius. Sir Cadogan is also fired, and the fat lady is put back at the entrance to the tower, along with several trolls to guard it. Ron actually likes the fame this experience seems to have gained him, and enjoys telling people about it in detail. He and Harry do question, however, why Black ran, instead of silencing Ron when he screamed. They reason it's simply because he knew he would have been caught otherwise, but of course, as we learn at the end, it's because he's not a murderer. Hagrid then invites Harry and Ron to his hut for tea and to talk to them about Hermione. He tells them she's been having a hard time lately and suggests they make up with her, but Ron still refuses to do so until she does something about Crookshanks. Hagrid also tells them that Buckbeak's hearing is soon. Now, the events leading up to Harry's run-in with Snape and Lupin confiscating the Marauders' map are quite different in both versions. The movie actually adds something here that wasn't in the book. Harry seeing Pettigrew on the map. Yeah, that never happened in the book. I actually think it's kind of a good idea. I have admittedly always wondered why Fred and George, while they had the map, never noticed someone named Peter Pettigrew sharing a bed with their brother. That said, I also feel like Peter Pettigrew being alive and the true betrayer of Harry's parents is more shocking if that possibility isn't even on our radar. Still though, I do like this idea, and it certainly doesn't give us enough to guess that he's Scabbers. So, what happens in the book instead? Well, there's another trip to Hogsmeade, and Harry, against Hermione's protests, decides to sneak in again, using the invisibility cloak this time. During this trip, Ron shows Harry the Shrieking Shack, and this is where he's confronted by Malfoy. It's no longer winter, so Harry hits him with mud rather than snow as in the movie. By the way, apparently Goyle's actor, Josh Herdman, was injured when they were filming this scene, so that's why this random Slytherin boy is in his place. During this fight, in the book, Harry trips Crabbe, and this pulls the invisibility cloak off his face. Malfoy sees Harry's floating head and runs away screaming. Harry rushes back through the passage to Hogwarts, leaving the invisibility cloak in the passage, knowing that if Malfoy tipped off a teacher, they would search for it in the common room. After he leaves the passage, Snape quickly finds him. Unlike in the movie, Snape doesn't talk to Harry in the hall. Rather, he takes Harry to his office to interrogate him. Snape tells Harry the story Malfoy told him about seeing Harry's floating head in Hogsmeade, and tries to provoke Harry into telling the truth. In hindsight, he's most likely using legitimacy to read Harry's mind. Snape also starts talking about Harry's father and how arrogant he was. He does this briefly in the movie as well, but I think it's too downplayed. You don't really get a sense of the sheer resentment Snape has towards James. In the book, as Snape mercilessly insults James to Harry's face, Harry gets, rightfully, furious and yells at him to shut up, much like he did with Marge in the movie.
Shut up!
Harry then reminds Snape that his father saved Snape's life once. This was something Dumbledore had told Harry about at the end of Philosopher's Stone, and Snape bitterly tells Harry what really happened, or at least his view of it. According to him, James and his friends had played a prank on him that would have gotten him killed, but James changed his mind at the last minute and saved Snape. According to Snape, James only saved him to avoid getting expelled. Lupin describes the event in more detail later in the Shrieking Shack. According to him, James actually had no knowledge of the prank, and it was Sirius alone who set it up. So, like in the movie, Snape makes Harry give him the Marauders map and tries to make it reveal its secrets, resulting in Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs insulting him, though in the book, they each insult him individually. In the movie, Lupin then shows up unexpectedly, but in the book, Snape actually calls him over using flue powder. Most likely, he recognized the nicknames on the map. In fact, he even suggests that Harry got the map directly from the manufacturers. Like in the movie, Lupin covers up for Harry and takes him, and Ron, who had arrived to try to cover for Harry too, away, then tells him off for not handing the map in to a teacher and for risking his life. While in the book he seems more disappointed than angry, he does seem legitimately angry with Harry in the movie, which I actually kind of like better. It shows a bit of a different side to him than the calm and patient one we've seen throughout the movie. In the movie, Harry tells Lupin he saw Pettigrew on the map, but in the book, since that never happened, he obviously doesn't. In the book, Harry and Ron return to Gryffindor Tower, where Hermione informs them that Hagrid lost his case, meaning Buckbeak's going to be executed. Ron tells Hermione he'll help her with the appeal, to which she responds by hugging him and apologizing for what happened to Scabbers. And yeah, that's all Ron needed to forgive her. In the book, because of all the security measures, they aren't able to go visit Hagrid, so they talk to him during one of their Care of Magical Creatures lessons. Hagrid starts crying over Buckbeak, prompting Malfoy to laugh at him and call him pathetic. In the book, this is where Hermione hits Malfoy. Also, she slaps him rather than punching him like in the movie. Following this, Hermione, in her anger at Malfoy and the pressure of her packed schedule, ends up missing a charms class. So unlike in the movie, we can see that her huge workload is actually really getting to her, however much she tries to deny it. She apologizes to Professor Flitwick before catching up with Harry and Ron at Divination. In the Divination class, of course, Professor Trelawney is starting to teach them about using crystal balls. While in the movie, Hermione tries to be polite and play along with Trelawney, in the book, she has completely run out of patience for the whole subject at this point. When Trelawney claims to see the Grim in Harry's crystal ball, she finally snaps, and when Trelawney tells her she never had what it takes for divination, she angrily drops the class and storms out. Although unlike in the movie, she doesn't knock the ball off the table. In the movie, Harry returns the ball, and this is where Trelawney goes into a trance and makes her prediction about the Dark Lord's servant returning to him. This prediction doesn't happen until later in the book. The book also has a funny line from Ron here as they're looking into the crystal balls. I don't need help. It's obvious what this means. There's going to be loads of fog tonight. In the book, we then have the final Quidditch match between Gryffindor and Slytherin. The night before that, though, Harry spots Crookshanks out the window, walking alongside an enormous black dog. This is where Harry starts to realize the dog can't be an omen of his death, seeing as Crookshanks can see it too. Due to the point standings, if Gryffindor are to win the Quidditch Cup, they need to beat Slytherin by more than 200 points, meaning Harry can't catch the snitch unless they're more than 50 points ahead. This is probably one of my favorite matches in the book, because due to the point requirement, it's on more than just Harry to win. It's also one of, if not the, dirtiest match in all of the books, with the Slytherins resorting to any brutal trick to win, and Lee Jordan's biased commentary is the icing on the cake. At one point, McGonagall is so angry at Malfoy, she doesn't even tell Lee off for insulting him, as she herself is doing the same thing. In the end, Harry catches the snitch when their team is 60 points ahead, resulting in Gryffindor winning the Quidditch Cup. The celebration is huge, and Wood actually breaks down crying into Harry's shoulder, having finally won the cup in his final year. Even McGonagall cries in happiness, and Percy forgets his dignity and starts jumping up and down. While I do think it was the right move on the part of the filmmakers to cut down on Quidditch, I have to say, I really loved this moment. The book then goes over the students' exams, including Lupin's defense against the Dark Arts one, which is an obstacle course of dark creatures ending with a Bogart. Harry aces that one perfectly, Ron loses at the second to last obstacle, and Hermione does it perfectly until the Bogart, from which she runs away screaming in terror. Apparently her Bogart was Professor McGonagall telling her she'd failed everything. What I do like about this is it shows Harry's skill at defense against the dark arts. It's the one subject he's actually better at than Hermione. On their way back up to the castle from the Defense Against the Dark Arts exam, the trio encounter Cornelius Fudge, who's there to witness the execution of Buckbeak, along with an extremely old member of the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures, who wasn't shown in the movie at all, and the executioner Walden McNair. The executioner is never named in the movie, but in the book, not only is he named, but he's said to be an old friend of Lucius Malfoy, which, as we learn in Goblet of Fire, means he's a Death Eater. Heck, they even got the same actor back from this movie in Order of the Phoenix. He's also said to be very bloodthirsty, hence why he took on the job of an executioner to begin with. The final exam for Harry and Ron is Divination, where Trelawney has them look into a crystal ball and tell her what they see. Harry makes something up, seeing he sees a hippogriff flying away. He never does see Sirius's face in the crystal ball like he does in the film. Just after Harry finishes the exam, this is where Trelawney goes into a trance and predicts the Dark Lord's servant returning to him. There's a bit more to it in the book, as she also says that the Dark Lord will rise again, greater than ever, with the servant's help. And of course, afterwards, she doesn't remember saying any of it. When Harry gets back to Gryffindor Tower, Ron and Hermione give him a note from Hagrid telling them he lost the appeal and that Buckbeak's going to be executed. They decide to go visit Hagrid like in the movie, but in the book, due to the extra security measures, they have to use the invisibility cloak, which Hermione goes to get from the secret passageway where Harry left it. In the movie, Hagrid is the one to find Scabbers and give him back to Ron, but in the book it's Hermione who finds him. Also, she doesn't demand an apology like in the movie, because book Hermione has actually had to acknowledge her mistake. Dumbledore then arrives along with Fudge and McNair, and Hagrid sends the trio out the back. I love the way Robbie Coltrane plays Hagrid's desperation to get them out.
I'm with you in a moment. Quick.
Hagrid. It'll be fine. It'll be okay.
It's also worth noting that at this point in the movie, we're already seeing the effects of Harry and Hermione's time travel, with those rock things being thrown into the hut and Hermione thinking she saw something in the woods. Neither of those things happen in the book. In fact, the whole time travel section is greatly expanded upon in the film. Unlike in the movie, the trio don't watch the execution. They're actually trying to get away from it so they don't have to see it. Unfortunately, they end up going slow because Scabbers has been struggling to escape from Ron's grip the whole way, and they end up hearing the axe fall. They then hear Hagrid howl in what they think is despair at Buckbeak's death, but as we learn later, is actually happiness at Buckbeak's escape. Harry wants to go back to him, but Ron and Hermione hold him back. In the movie, Ron drops Scabbers after he bites him, but in the book, Crookshanks shows up and Scabbers breaks free from Ron's grip and runs. Crookshanks chases him, and Ron chases them both. Ron eventually catches Crookshanks and stuffs Scabbers in his pocket, and then the huge black dog shows up. There's a bit more of a fight here in the book, as we see Ron actually try to protect Harry from the dog, leading to the dog grabbing him and dragging him into the passage under the Whomping Willow. In the book, Ron actually breaks his leg here. He tries to wrap it around one of the tree branches, causing it to break as the dog pulls him in. Also, in the book, Crookshanks actually goes up and presses a knot on the tree, causing it to freeze. The willow is connected to the Marauders' backstory, but since they cut that, as well as Crookshanks helping Sirius, in the movie, Harry and Hermione actually have to fight their way through the willow's flailing branches. So Harry and Hermione follow Crookshanks through the tunnel into the Shrieking Shack. And now, we're here. The scene where all of my biggest problems with this adaptation come in. This part of the book gives us a lot of information and backstory across 3 chapters, in addition to introducing us to 2 important characters. In the movie, this is all stuffed into 7 minutes. Most of the backstory is cut, and what the movie does give us feels very rushed. First, I'll just talk about Sirius for a moment. The movie makes him seem a lot crazier at first than the book does, grinning as Harry has his wand pointed at him and shouting hysterically about wanting to kill him. Of course, he's talking about Pettigrew, though we're led to believe he means Harry. Given how long he's been in Azkaban, as well as his desperation to take revenge for James and Lily, it makes sense that he would be a bit unhinged. However, it does make his sudden change a bit more jarring. In the book, Sirius does want to kill Pettigrew before explaining anything, but he's not nearly as hysterical about it, and what makes him relent is Lupin telling him he owes Harry the truth. In the movie, Sirius also comes across as quite immature during the confrontation with Snape, acting almost like they're still in school and seemingly caring more about making fun of Snape than convincing him of the truth. In the book, he seems much more composed and actually tries to reason with him. If anything, it's Snape who acts immaturely, at least on the surface. We'll get to that later, though. All that being said, I do love Gary Oldman in this role. He really brings a sense of warmth to this character, especially in Order of the Phoenix. So, the trio encounter Sirius, and again, Hermione steals a line and moment from Ron.
If you want to kill Harry, you'll have to kill us too.
Yeah, Ron says that line in the book. He even stands, despite his broken leg, to put himself in front of Harry. It's actually a pretty badass moment from him. Also, when Ron does this, it says, "Something flickered in Black's shadowed eyes." I think this is because he's seeing himself in Ron, since he would have done the same for James. The fight between Harry and Sirius is a bit more brutal in the book, with Harry punching him all over, and Ron and Hermione even coming in to help. Crookshanks also tries to help Sirius by going for Harry's wand, but he gets it back first. Crookshanks then tries to protect Sirius by stepping between him and Harry even considers killing the cat too. Ultimately, Harry hesitates. Even consumed by vengeance, he's just not a murderer. Then Lupin arrives, and this is where things start to get a bit confusing. In the movie, Lupin already seems to know that Sirius is innocent, making it seem like he has been helping him this whole time. He wasn't, though. He, like everyone else, believed that Sirius betrayed James and Lily and was trying to kill Harry. And how he learns the truth ties into how he knew to come to the Shrieking Shack in the first place, which the movie also doesn't explain. Lupin had been watching the Marauders map in his office, and on the map, he saw the trio leave Hagrid's, now accompanied by Peter Pettigrew, who he had believed to be dead. He then saw Sirius Black show up on the map and drag Ron and Peter into the tree. Wanting answers, Lupin rushed out through the tunnel into the Shrieking Shack. When he shows up, he asks Sirius where he is, and Sirius points seemingly to Ron, but in fact to Pettigrew. Lupin then realizes that the only reason Pettigrew wouldn't have revealed himself before now is if he was Voldemort's spy and not Sirius. He realizes that the Potters must have switched their secret keeper without telling him. It's only then that he lifts Sirius up and embraces him. The trio are of course horrified, not having understood that exchange, and thinking Lupin has been in league with Black, who they still think is a murderer, this whole time. Hermione reveals to the other two that Lupin is a werewolf, which she figured out after doing Snape's essay, which he had hoped would happen. And much like she stole Ron's line before, she also steals a line from Harry here, though not quite as egregious.
I trusted you! And all this time, you've been his friend.
It does make some sense for her to say this after she's been covering up for him, but I feel it works better coming from Harry since he's the one who spent the most time with Lupin throughout the movie and learned a lot from him. Lupin then gives the trio back their wands and pockets his own to gain their trust, and explains how he knew they were there. He tells them that he's Moony and helped make the map, and finally he reveals to them that Scabbers is in fact Peter Pettigrew. Understandably, they don't believe him. Lupin then tells them, and us, his entire backstory. He was bitten by a werewolf when he was only a small child, and since the Wolfsbane potion hadn't been invented yet, he became a full-fledged monster whenever he transformed. It seemed unlikely that he would be able to attend Hogwarts, but when Dumbledore became headmaster, he agreed to let Lupin come as long as they took precautions. The Shrieking Shack and the tunnel leading to it were built so that Lupin could go there to transform every full moon, and the Whomping Willow was planted over the entrance so no one would come across him while transformed. People in the village heard the howls coming from the shack and believed it was haunted, a rumor Dumbledore encouraged to keep people away. Lupin's three best friends, James Potter, Sirius Black, and Peter Pettigrew, noticed that he went missing every month, and he made up excuses, believing they would abandon him if they learned what he was. Eventually they figured it out, and rather than abandon him, they decided to become animagi so they could keep him company while he was transformed, since a werewolf is only a danger to humans. They finally managed this in their 5th year, and since they never told anyone, they were never entered into the Ministry's Animagus registry. Every full moon, the 4 of them would roam the Hogwarts grounds and the village. Because of this, they learned a lot about the passages in and out of Hogwarts and created the Marauders map. Dumbledore never knew that they were doing this, or that James, Sirius, and Peter were animagi. Lupin often felt guilty about betraying Dumbledore's trust by breaking the rules he had put in place for his safety. He says that the reason he never told Dumbledore all this year that Sirius was an animagus was because he didn't want to reveal to him that he had betrayed his trust at school, so he convinced himself that Sirius was getting into the castle using dark magic Voldemort had taught him. Lupin also talks about the relationship he and the Marauders had with Snape at school, and the prank that nearly killed Snape. Snape deeply disliked the Marauders, especially James, and in the case of James and Sirius, the feeling was mutual. Snape, trying to figure out where Lupin disappeared to every month, noticed Madame Pomfrey leading him into the Whomping Willow. Sirius apparently thought it would be amusing to tell Snape how to get in there. Snape went in, and James, hearing about this, ran in and pulled him out. But not before Snape glimpsed the transformed Lupin at the end of the tunnel. Snape, however, thought both James and Lupin were in on it, and so he hated all of them more than ever. So yeah, that whole backstory was completely cut from the movie, which I think was a huge mistake. It adds so much to the world and the characters and really helps tie things together and explain things. So then Snape shows up, and again, this part feels rushed. And the fact that they never explain Snape's history with Sirius and Lupin doesn't help. First of all, like with Lupin, the movie doesn't explain how Snape knew to come to the Shrieking Shack. He had gone to Lupin's office, found the map, still open, on his desk, and saw him head into the tunnel under the Whomping Willow. The way he reveals himself is also very different. In the movie, he just sort of shows up and disarms Sirius. In the book, he had found the invisibility cloak outside the Whomping Willow and was waiting in the room, invisible, while Lupin was telling the story, before pulling it off to reveal himself. So yeah, Snape now officially knows about the invisibility cloak. This is also, sadly, another place where the movie softens Snape's behavior, and I don't think they should have. In the movie, as I mentioned before, we see Sirius coming across a bit deranged and being intentionally difficult, making Snape look like the more reasonable one by comparison, and also making it a bit more confusing when Harry attacks him. In the book, Snape is completely beyond reason here, and while Sirius does act a bit petulant with him, both he and Lupin try to explain the situation, but he refuses to listen. Even when the trio chime in to try and reason with him, Snape yells at them and tells them they should be grateful to him for saving them. When it becomes clear he's not going to listen to reason, all three students, not just Harry, use their wands to knock Snape out. By the way, after what we learn in Deathly Hallows, I kind of look at this scene in a new light. This isn't Snape just refusing to let go of a childhood grudge, though there is definitely some of that. This is Snape confronting the man he believes to have betrayed and caused the death of the woman he loves. Not that it justifies his behavior, of course, but it does make it more understandable. So, Snape has been knocked out, but the trio still aren't fully sold on Lupin and Sirius' story. At Ron's asking, Sirius explains yet another thing that was cut from the movie. How he even knew Peter was at Hogwarts. Fudge, during an inspection of Azkaban, gave Sirius his newspaper, and on that paper was the picture of the Weasleys in Egypt, with Scabbers on Ron's shoulder. They then notice that Scabbers is missing a toe, and Sirius says that Peter cut it off when he confronted him, killed the 12 muggles, making it look like Sirius did, and faked his own death by turning into a rad. He also explains about Crookshanks and how he's been helping him by trying to catch Peter and bring him to him. Now, after all of this, Harry is finally convinced that Scabbers is Pettigrew, but he still thinks that Black was the one to betray his parents because of the Fidelius charm and him being their secret keeper. This is when Sirius reveals that they switched the secret keeper to Pettigrew at the last minute, and that it was him who persuaded James and Lily to do so. Because of this, he's always blamed himself for their deaths. Lupin decides to prove it once and for all, and he and Sirius force Pettigrew back into his human form. Now, I love Timothy Spall's performance as Pettigrew, and the makeup job they did on him is just phenomenal. However, I feel like they made the character a little too sinister in the movies. We see at several moments him grinning evilly as Voldemort does horrible things to people, which I don't think is in line with how the character is supposed to be. Peter Pettigrew isn't a sadistic monster who enjoys other people's pain and suffering. He's just a selfish coward who will do anything to save his own life, and will side with whoever he thinks is the most powerful. And because of the way he acts in the movies, I never really believed that he was ever really friends with Sirius and Lupin. I just find it hard to imagine that they ever would have been friends with someone like this. In the books, while it's clearly long past, I do at least believe that there was a genuine friendship there once. And I think you really see it in this exchange. He was taking over everywhere. What was there to be gained by refusing him? What was there to be gained by fighting the most evil wizard who has ever existed? Only innocent lives, Peter. You don't understand. He would have killed me, Sirius. Then you should have died. Died rather than betray your friends, as we would have done for you. So, now that Pettigrew is revealed, in the book he desperately tries to convince Lupin and the trio that he's innocent and that Sirius is working for Voldemort. Sirius tells Pettigrew that he heard things in Azkaban, that the other Death Eaters think he betrayed them given that it was his information that led to Voldemort's downfall, and suggests that they're the ones he's really been hiding from all these years. Hermione then asks a couple questions that, again, were never answered in the movie. Firstly, why hasn't Pettigrew tried to kill Harry before now, given that he's been sharing a dormitory with him for 3 years? Sirius claims it's simply because he would have gained nothing from it. Unless he thought Voldemort was powerful enough to protect him, he wasn't going to risk hurting Harry under Albus Dumbledore's nose. Secondly, she asks Sirius how he escaped from Azkaban. He explains that knowing he was innocent was what kept him sane and enabled him to keep his powers, so he could transform into a dog whenever things became too much. When he saw Peter in that paper, perfectly positioned to strike at Harry if word got out that Voldemort might be coming back, it fueled an obsession in him, something the Dementors couldn't destroy as it wasn't a happy feeling. One night, he slipped past them as a dog, since it's harder for them to sense animal emotions, escaped, and swam to the mainland. After this, Sirius tells Harry he would have died before he betrayed James and Lily, and Harry finally believes him. So yeah, lots of information, backstory, and explanations in this scene that the movie just doesn't bother telling us. While I can't argue with anyone who says this is the best Harry Potter movie, this will always stand out to me as a huge mark against it.